So hi, welcome to the fourth working session, pre-summit working session, where we are basically trying to figure out what are the sessions that we are going to do at the Open Security Summit that happens between 15 and 19 of June, although now with the new training sessions, which we'll cover in a bit, it's kind of going to start actually on the 1st of June. So very exciting things. Today what we're going to try to do is cover the key topics on cloud security. I think there's quite a wide range of areas that we should go. We're going to throw a bunch of ideas out there and see which ones you believe we could also go, and then also try to come up with a strategy for how to actually get some of the key players on the cloud security to be involved, so that we also learn from them and get that kind of mind share of people that really are passionate about cloud security. So Didar is actually going to give you a first run of just a quick introduction of the summit and what it is, and then we can get into the cloud security elements of it. So go for it.
So if you haven't been to a summit, it's quite an experience. It's quite intensive. I've been there last year for the first time and I couldn't get enough of it. So this year I ended up becoming one of the organizers. So it's somewhere, it's not a conference, it's not one person speaking and others are listening, it's not a webinar, it's somewhere we all come together and discuss a real world example or real world problems and try to come up with solutions. And as we are a really intelligent community, we're having these pre-summit sessions so that we can be prepared to discuss what are our passion topics or our real painful topics that we can find a solution to. This year it's between 15th and 19th of June, and it's all online. It hasn't been all virtual up till now, so it has brought its own challenges, but generally it has been much better for us because now we can reach more people, more countries can attend, and we also need to cover different time zones as well. Yep, as you can see, there are lots of collaborative sessions and smiling people. We've had amazing outcomes in the last few years, and this is going to be the 6th summit this year. And Dennis, you can jump in if I miss anything. And people are usually leaving with a more confident state, and people usually have good experience in this. Okay, I'm switching screens, sorry. So how does it work? So there are several types of sessions. So there are working sessions where the people like us, we all come together on a topic, we discuss it, and we try to find outcomes, create outcomes. These are working sessions, or there are user sessions where we come and try to learn something together. We're not necessarily focused on the outcomes, creating the outcomes, but testing the outcomes of other working sessions. And there are 3 types of people in the community who organize and take part in this. There are organizers, such as myself and Dennis. We create the sessions, we help with the admin stuff. And then there are the practitioners, the people who actively contribute in creating the sessions, creating the content, the outcomes. And then there are the participants. These are the people who are new to the industry, who want to learn more, who are there. They still contribute a lot because every question they ask sparks some sort of debate and furthers us in our industry and topics. So we will cover some sessions today, and these are all the things that we need to think about. What do we want to learn? What do we want to discuss? What do we want to solve? What are the problems that we face in cloud security every day? What is something that you thought, I wish more people knew about this. This is such a simple thing, but nobody knows about this. These tricky stuff. It's 100% online. It's going to be on Hey Summit as a platform we're using this year. And this is our timeline. So we are already in the brainstorming sessions. This is one of them. We're going to be running these this week and next. And at the end of these, we aim to have a draft schedule posted on Hey Summit so that people can start registering for the actual sessions. And then for this year, we decided to put some training sessions before the summit so that people who are newcomers or not confident enough in some of the subjects can get to a baseline of understanding of the subjects. So we're going to run them in the 2 weeks before the summit. And then there's the 1 full week of summit between 15th and 19th of June. And the schedule will be like this. So 1 keynote, then 2 hour sessions with 1 hour breaks each time. And in the night sessions, we are thinking about doing video nights. We normally had barbecue and movie nights at the actual summit, so we'll try our best to replicate it.
Virtual barbecue.
Yeah, maybe if you find a platform.
That actually would be quite interesting, right? everybody barbecue.
Just don't do it on your desk.
Yeah, everybody barbecue at the same time, right?
I live in a flat. I'm not allowed to do a barbecue. But
you can have a candle.
By the looks of your background, you wouldn't be very good at it.
I might barbecue myself.
just have a small candle. There you go.
Oh.
That works too.
So I guess that's it from me. This year we have, these are all like draft tracks. The tracks are the areas that we want to focus on. As you can see on there, we have AWS, Azure as separate things, but in tonight's session, we're going to cover them together, and we're going to focus on what you want to focus on. That's the objective of the session. So tickets are £50, but if you are an OWASP member or a leader, we decided to make it free for you guys. This is because you guys contribute to the community. All the OWASP projects make our lives easier as security professionals, so you deserve it.
To be honest, I bought one today anyway because it's 50 quid and the money goes in and it's, helps towards the running of the conference.
Thank you so much. That is so kind of you.
Thank you, Tony.
Or should I say EY bought the 50 pound ticket?
Thank you, EY. That's very good.
What's the link with EY? Sorry, this is my first interaction with you guys.
Oh, Tony works for EY.
Oh, yes, right, okay.
So he's just expensing me.
I see, yeah. Okay.
So he basically uses
hey, David, last time we worked together, David, was a long time ago.
It was a very long time ago. It's good to see you again.
And we planted 3 for you for every ticket.
Yeah.
So there's
So
that.
we're actually going to be nice carbon neutral on this one, right? Should we plant a tree for
This year.
Yeah.
Well, this year is carbon neutral. And I don't even get my printer, so I can print all the materials.
And Glasswall has kindly sponsored a few tickets. I don't really know the number of them. Dennis knows the number.
A lot.
And we do expect many of Glasswall people to actively contribute, and they already are contributing. Like Adam is helping us out in the organization. And
yeah, and Petra, and Thomas now. Cool.
Anything to add from your side, Dennis, before we move on to discussing tonight's topic?
I think that the main one is just on that topic of creating the sessions. I think it's very important that kind of everybody realize that the best summit sessions are some sessions that there's an individual that passionately cares about it. So this is where you kind of want to lose a bit of the shyness and sometimes being a bit more proactive on the sessions that you want to have. And look, I'll speak by personal experience, right? I created sessions at Summit on things that I want to know, right? I was a CISO, I had some areas that I needed help with. I created sessions around those, right? And then it's a very honest session because you come with an idea, you come with a set of problems, and then it's easy for this to contribute. So on the topic of cloud security, we really want to have sessions around real world problems that we have, right? And if you're having a problem, then it's a real world problem. It doesn't matter, if you should be easy. The bottom line, it's not easy. And we should be creating sessions. In fact, you should be creating sessions around very specific topics so that, we can bring kind of the knowledge of everybody else that's dealing with the same problem, and we can share experiences. So go away, create a bunch of sessions, and it's a bit Darwinian, let the best sessions kind of win, because they'll have more registrations and they have more talent and they'll have more people involved. And that's the key question that you want to think about. When we get some of the world experts in the same virtual room, and we all focus on collaboration, and it's very important that everything we do here is open, it's all open source, it's all released under Creative Commons, and it's also all recorded this year, which I think is going to be very interesting because it allows us to actually capture a lot of great conversations, great outcomes that in the past were kind of lost because we were all in rooms in the middle of nowhere, and we did produce some good stuff. But I think this year is going to be more interesting because we can get a lot of talent. And then the second part of this is that because it's virtual, we should be able to get a huge amount of talent. So, go out there, invite whoever you think should be involved, and then, let's create, really amazing sessions. Cool.
Very good. So let's start thinking about what we want.
So let me throw the first one, right? So I think on the cloud security, we should really be talking about, like I mentioned, real world challenges. So let's say, for example, from Glasswall, we could say that we are working heavily on how to process large quantities of files in the cloud environment, how to deal with limitations on cloud providers. So how to, for example, take it so that we can scan or we can process a filter on a file that goes from 10K to a gigabyte, right? Or 2 gigabytes, where you can't use lambdas for some of those stuff and you can't use these things. And also how do you handle malicious software inside of it? Because they, by proxy, we process malicious files. So that's a really cool session because it goes to the heart of how to scale on AWS, how to scale on Azure, how to scale on Google Cloud Platform, how to use those, how to lock down those environments. And that's a good example of a session that we should be able to get some good crowd because it's a real world problem. I'd say another one is how to provision securely these environments, how to do it with CloudFormation, how to do it with SAM, how to do it with Pulumi, how to do it with Terraform, like what's the multiple ways that individuals are doing and how are they scaling, those kind of provisions. And, what we want is, again, people and companies to come in and share how they solving these particular problems. So what other topics you feel that we think we should cover?
There's a challenge I see quite a lot actually, which is the more, I guess I've seen it with larger organizations, which are a bit more complex in nature, a bit more disorganized, where they have multi-cloud environments, and actually they're struggling to manage those multi-cloud environments from both a kind of standard cloud perspective in terms of strategy, model, and architecture, but also when it's security related, how do you manage identity across AWS, GCP, and Azure? Which one do you use? What security capabilities for? Key management, secrets management is different across all of them. Do you pick one? You pick three? There's all kinds of issues relating to multi-cloud environments and a growing number of businesses that have instances of all of these, compounded by also kind of internal private clouds.
Yeah.
So kind of managing those types of environments, I think is a real challenge that is becoming more of an issue.
Yeah, but I would say that the right answer from a security point of view is not to argue, is to say that's reality. right? I think from a, in fact, I had a really very interesting conversation yesterday. I'm starting to see some interesting movements on even security teams that clearly have been told from the top, I don't care about your worries, just make it work, right? So I'll give you like it's the Zoom conversation where you could see that the cabinet office we kept saying that we want to use these things, but the security team probably said no, and then one day they're going, screw you, we're going to do it, right? So yes. Figure it out. So I've seen, for example, some projects or people, for example, we're going to move the cloud, and the conversation in literally a month moved from not sure reservations to look, we're doing this and we have 90 days to do it. So I think some of these things is like from a security angle, we need to be on the other side going, tell me what you want. You want multi-cloud? You want 5 clouds? You want 10 clouds? You want 20 clouds? That's fine. This is how we should think about it.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point, right? So this isn't a try and stop the business and try and do it securely by design, because as nice as that is, and as much as we try to move towards that, the reality is that's hard, and in many cases we have to fix afterwards. So I guess the position I'm talking from is your current situation is you've now got multi-cloud, it's insecure, the business has got the outcomes they're looking for, but now how do you almost retrospectively secure that? Where do you start?
So what about a topic, or the session will be multi-cloud security patterns?
I was going to say, I've been doing a fair bit of work recently with designing security patterns for certain scenarios, etc., for clients. So that's if a project team wants to spin up, say, an AWS for, say, an app with a relational database at back end, and they've got these patterns to follow, security patterns for doing that.
Yeah. See, I think that would be massively valuable. I'll give you an example, right? So I feel that at the moment we have pretty good grip on Azure and AWS security, but we commercially want to offer on Google Clouds and on the IBM clouds, right? And DigitalOcean, right? So, what I don't want is I don't want the first versions of my offering on those providers to be substandard, right? Because, we don't have the expertise to lock it down, right? So I think these patterns, and in fact, I would throw one in, which I think we are embracing, that actually I would love to get your opinion on, which is to actually run individual accounts almost as a security boundary. So actually so instead of, again, have this horror story that people go, oh, I want one account to control it. We're actually, ironically, because AWS and Azure, they don't give you a lot of granularity sometimes inside of it, right? And it becomes a mess. It's actually better if you actually start running individual accounts almost per team, per topic. So we actually are selling individual accounts per customer. So instead of running a multi-cloud environment, so multi-tenants, we actually run, one of the offerings is we actually sell, an instance for them. But that brings a lot of other challenges, right? How do you manage, theoretically thousands, right, of more tens of thousands of accounts? Yeah. But the good news is, from an isolation point of view, is massive, right? Because, if the customer says, where's my data? We go, well, it's all in there, right?
Yeah. So that's a really interesting approach, actually. I think I'll probably give some thought, because I've not really considered it. But I think the whole kind of identity across multi-cloud is a real struggle, because, as you say, the granularity of permissions and the discrepancy between roles and permissions varies so. I mean, how do you reconcile that?
So have you added single sign-on to AWS? So we did that. It's brilliant. So we added. Is anybody from my team here? But Petra is there from a security team. One of the great work they've done was the security team was able to put single sign-on AWS, which actually it's a good example of a better user experience. So it used to be a pain, log into AWS, you got the tokens, blah, blah, blah. Now I got my single sign-on. As long as I'm logging into, if I'm not wrong, is through Azure. I got single sign-on through it, right? And I access my AWS resources. And then they actually control the policies that I get. So it's actually pretty sweet.
Nice. Okay.
But of course, identity management is not resolved by SSO, is it? There's service accounts and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, but you do roles, right? So in this case, you also assign roles to your account. So when you single sign on, also from a global level in AWS, we assign the roles to you that you have. So you only will see certain accounts with certain privileges, i.e. with certain IAM roles on it.
The other thing I was going to say, Dennis, in that going back to the example, another thing for cloud security is the kind of policies and how that reflects on what you implement. Because you've just talked there about what your implementation is, but from the documentation stack and from a kind of executive policy point of view, and what you do around disaster, business continuity, and all those things, all the ISO bits. It's how that documentation then should inform what you're doing in terms of setting up, and then how you check that back. So I think. That's at the on the management side, it'd be good to have a session about how do you what frameworks should you be using, and how that reflects on what you've just described, which is the control of the roles.
Well, so I think what's interesting is so by the way, for somebody who might not know, so Ben is trying to do this, and you open sourced it, right? Or we're going to talk about it tomorrow?
Yeah, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Yeah.
Right.
Nearly.
We're going to release it. So he's done this really cool mapping between the multiple standards, right? And this actually is a good example of, I want a pattern that is almost a recipe that I know that, for example, setting up 2FA on cloud providers, right? And then, or setting up these permissions, or locking out this, or monitoring, or using billing as a security mechanism, etc., or how to consume that data, or sending data to certain providers. We should almost look at each cloud and say, how do you do this in the cloud, in that one? And we actually should be getting the cloud providers involved, right? They should be the ones also giving us the guidance.
And I'm doing this in the media and entertainment space. And so what we're doing is trying to get a very basic set of, maybe 150 policies that the management see, and then probably 500 or 600 at a detail level. But if I've combined these 4 frameworks, I've ended up with 1,500, 2,000 controls. And so those should go into an implementation guide. So what I'm getting from Amazon and we'll get from Azure is like a stack of all their configuration guides, their best practice, a Git repo with all the right tools, all the links in. So you can you can come in, you can say, here's my policies, which go to your multi-cloud case. If you step into Amazon Web Services, at the point you get down to the implementation detail, you've got the up-to-date guides, and it's how you make sure that as those policies change, as new threats come in, that's reflected. So I think it's probably worth a session just talking about the governance and the policy side of what you're doing, as well as the kind of technical details of what you set up.
Does that tie into compliance as code, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, I actually think that multi-cloud security patterns and multi-cloud governance, right, and even multi-cloud compliance as codes, they're all worth a session.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really interesting project, Ben.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
I hopefully, I'll chat with Dennis tomorrow. Hopefully I'll be able to kind of socialize a bit ahead of time, and that might kind of, we can work out where it fits. But this is for the media and entertainment space, so I don't know if, but I'm sure there are parallels with other industries.
What standards have you used so far?
CSA, CIS, the MPA, Trusted Partner Network, and OWASP ASVS.
Actually, Ben, do you want to just give a quick intro now while we're here? I was going to ask you yesterday. Can you just spend like 3 minutes on it, 5 minutes on it?
Yeah. So I mean, essentially, the challenge I had is that in the media.
Wait. So start from the beginning, so we can then just clip this and then make a little masterclass. You're going to share your screen, yeah?
Hold on.
You ready for that?
Yeah. Let me just get the presentation up. Hold on. Just wait 1 second. Bear with me.
Just at any point.
Yeah. Hold on.
It's like looking at the ceiling.
I know. I was going to say, how many margins?
I'm looking for inspiration to the heavens. Hold on.
I was going to say, how many margins
behind you?
Yeah, it's like, yeah. Hold on. Yeah, this is. I've ordered my green screen, so soon I'll be able to look you all, in the eye while I'm doing my presentation. It's that's why I don't like turning the camera on when you're trying to work on another screen. Hold on. Let me just get this up. So again, in the spirit of sharing. This hasn't been cleared to share yet. So,
well, this is being recorded.
Yeah, okay. So maybe turn the recording off for this bit, please.
Well, that's not possible.
Okay. In that case, I'll show you. Yeah, let me just get to this piece. All right. So
that's the beauty of this. Everything is open. You know, everything you guys present has to be open.
Yeah. Okay. I haven't had permission yet, but that's fine. I'll let me just do this.
So on the topic of this, like I think that the pattern that we're talking about here is this situation where we're looking at leverage, right? We're looking at how can I do one thing and benefit by touching 4 or 5, you know, situations. So can I do one pattern? Look, Petra is a good example, right? So Petra, you know, works for the security team. One of her roles is to make sure that, you know, we provide good security patterns and practices across, you know, all our environments. So, you know, she needs very clear guidance. She needs very clear set of instructions for, you know, what to look for, how to use the tools, so that we you know, when we look at one question, we can answer those questions on the multiple cloud environments.
Yeah. Are you seeing my screen okay now?
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, basically, in the movie industry, the issue is you've got a long supply chain. Traditionally, movie studios have made very expensive content, and then it's got to get distributed remotely. So, how do you do that content security? So, there are typically 2 communities: InfoSec and content security. And what they've done is built a common control set, largely based on what Disney had. And they've tried to move to a model where you get a common audit across that supply chain, so that individual vendors aren't having to try and get 4 different audits separately for each studio. So that was the idea. That's the concept. But then in the interim, what's happened is, you know, along has come the cloud. You know, audiences have shifted online, and digital production technologies is really consolidating very fast, and cloud-based workflows. So while the MPA, which is quite an old-fashioned organization and quite, you know, legal and lobbyists, they don't have that technology grounding, and the industry is kind of ahead of where the standards are. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, if you like, this is about across the supply chain, how to get an evolution. So you start with your basic cyber essentials. Top kind of right-hand side, you're in a regulated industry, and but by and large, media and entertainment is not in that industry. But I'd say that GDPR and CCPA are going to actually have some big penalties. So in the UK, there's an organization called the Digital Production Partnership, and they've got a self-certified checklist. The problem with that is 41 controls. Yes, I'm done. I'm tick, 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 tick. If it's filled in by the salesman because they want to get the business, that's not really a proper audit. So what you have is a professional audit and around TPN. And then if you go kind of to the further right, the more advanced people are doing things like zero trust. But it's how do you make sure that you get people across this supply chain to get better? So it's really, for me, this is all about software, whether it's, you know, a SaaS service, whether it's your integration code, whether your infrastructure is code. It's all about code, and it's about how we get a new control set. So yeah, Walt Disney 3000 in the supply chain, NBCU 1600, BBC Studios 500. But across all those business types, this is really about the cultural challenge of making security not a tick box exercise to get the business, but to actually make it embedded. So taking the kind of this ISO kind of approach, if you take the MPA, the ccvsa, CIS, OWASP, and say, right, let's try and map those all together, try and get a control set. And I can show you this spreadsheet, which is like 800 controls, which are custom written based on Disney. Horrific to try and maintain, loads of typos, loads of missed links in it. So, and then try that against some use cases, and then make sure we've got the metrics to run a professional audit. And to do that, what I've done is taken all the these overlapping controls, broken them down into these 5 pillars, and said, look, there's stuff which will always be about site security, physical security. There's stuff around people and process. There's stuff around cloud specific, infrastructure management, and kind of the development lifecycle. And I think those 5 pillars work well in media and entertainment, but I'm not sure how they play out with other people. And then depending on your use case, different ones of those controls will apply. But at when I first kind of got involved in this area, is this is a 100-page PDF, and I turned it into a Confluence database and found a bunch of errors in it, which people just read across, you know, like things that were repeats and typos and wrong links. So by doing this, you avoid doing that control effort. So you basically remove that effort for writing the controls, and you also then have a way of you know, making sure you've got a very uniform approach. If you've got the cloud platforms on board, and this thing I was talking about, you can get move some of those more granular controls into secure config guidelines and provide a repo that says, if you're on AWS, here's Prowler, here's the different tools you'd use. And so you're kind of getting the platforms compete with each other to make sure they've got the best stack. Obviously, instead of publishing that 100-page PDF, which people will then deal with in different ways, or pay an expensive consultant to build a template, most people doing software are using Jira and Confluence. So, you know, I've built several of these, but you can just have a document database with your design guides on, meeting records, instant defect tracking, classic release pipeline, whatever other tools you've got for CI/CD, and having a risk register. So you can basically take those controls and write a procedure against them. And what that means is when you then get an update, you know which of those controls has changed, and therefore where you've got to go and update your procedures. So, and from an audit point of view, it means when you go and look at that, you can see exactly where someone hasn't immediately responded to a change. The last bit is obviously if we've got an ISAC, which is publishing threats to media and entertainment. You bring those threats in, it means you can also update your risk register. The last bit here is really, you know, this is all about people. It's all about culture. And so identifying who's read which of those documents, what their training is, where they're certified, means you can actually give people a very practical way of improving their security culture. So that's the way forward. And if you take this, and this isn't the latest map, this is what I'm talking to Dennis about, some of the stuff we did at Photobox with the graph mapping, but what I want to do is basically take all the relationships, and I've hand curated this into this monster spreadsheet, and then you can start to say against each of these blocks, what are so I've mapped this to ISO, but you could equally well do this to CIS or CSA, and you can then say for most executives, they're not going to get below this level. Right down on the end of these branches, you're going to really write down the granular detail where your security experts are, but it's changing the discussion from being to make it more of a business discussion than it being a technical discussion with a very small group of experts.
And by the way, that's a graph. That's not a map.
Of course.
Can you show the spreadsheet?
Yeah. Hold on. Let me just pull up the spreadsheet.
So this is the bit you're going to open source, right?
Yeah.
Spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Because that's the hard part, right? And I think it's a first good pass, and then what we want is the validation, right, from the community that it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of logic.
So, a whole bunch of other standards to go into it.
Yeah, absolutely, right. So the idea would be that once you got this into a graph format, and I know most of my stuff end up in Jira, but I'll probably say that something like YML, right, or a sort of a native file-based format that we can link to it. As long as everything has an ID of it, we can then export into this and have multiple visualizations. And the beauty of this is that I would look at this and basically ask the question: what is the 20% or 15% or 50% of this that is relevant to us? And then we'll do those. But having that connection with kind of all the other principles and all the other standards is massive.
So this is what I manually curated. It was an absolute beast of a task to try and get all this stuff in. But what I'm hoping to do is, I mean, a Google Sheet is great for collaboration. It's not really the place to do this, but I put these in, and so we're taking a bunch of quite granular controls here. Let me just sort by. So here are the current internal controls, but these controls, when you look at them, the categories data protection, access control, they're all of them based. All these standards all map back to NIST, and if you take a CSA mapping, you know, they've got all their arbitrary things, but when you actually start exploring what those look like, no one really tests those. They're very opinion led. So you'll get this one-to-many mappings. So what I'm hoping to do is bring this in and then try and take all the potential mappings you've got, cross-reference that, and work out where on the heat map is how these work. And then you should end up with something that is, you get a degree of equivalence. So for media and entertainment, I've selected a group that I think cover most of the things. You know, there may well be ones that are more appropriate, like a PCI or something like that for finance. But I think if you get this as a framework, it means you should be able to take any mappings that people are providing in and cross compare them. So it tends to be a bit of a religious divide. You know, any auditor you talk to says, or any security expert says, oh, we've got to use CIS, or we've got to use CSA, or we've got to use something else. And really, where I started from this was saying, well, if you're going to get to cloud, what you've got to do is start with the cloud vendors, because they've all, there's blood on the walls in the meeting rooms where they've all agreed how they can have a common set of controls. So start with that, and then at least you're avoiding any argument about the semantics of what you're doing, because you're following someone else's control. So, and that's just having had to derive some of these control sets. It's removing that problem, I think, that's the biggest challenge. So again, sorry, I've taken quite a lot of time, but I think this is probably worth the session at just talking about how this could work.
Definitely. Ben, are you using any one of the actual control sets as like a primary control set to map the others against, or are you just sort of looking through?
Well, I've broken them down into these business chunks, and so there are common people and process controls across any one of those. And so what I'm trying to do is then say, well, let's pick for people and process, what's the master? You know, what is the one that is most appropriate? So CSA really is very cloud focused, but when you look at the CSA controls, there's only 4 controls that talk about application security. So which is kind of given that everything is code, it's a bit weak. So whether you drop into OWASP and you've got 360 controls, I know because I manually copied them from a PDF. 360 controls, which are very granular. So, you know, what level of granularity do you need? My contention is that really the issue we've got here is not about the semantics or the particular framework or the detail, because there are only 2 people that are really interested in that. It's the auditor and the guy that's actually having to run the implementation. But it's how you engage the business. So I've tried to abstract it and make it a bit higher level, but I don't think you lose any integrity if you take these controls and map them together. So, you know, there may well be another framework, you know, that works well in here, but the bottom line, they all derive from NIST and ISO, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I asked about core one, so for example, AWS use COBIT as their primary, and then have mapped all the other standards against it, hence why they have so many standards that they've got certification against.
So I'm doing a project for Amazon Studios at the moment, so I'm pretty deeply engaged with the AWS guys, and they're quite excited about this approach for the media entertainment space, because I think they've got a lot of work done. They've done a lot of mapping, but what this does is take away that need to maintain that mappings, because it's trying to compare religions. You know, people come with a certain set of experience, or they come with a bias, and I don't know which one is right or wrong, but what I'd rather do is be able to say, look, that's fine for this chunk around people, we cover it. So and I think this can be generalized, because you're always going to have a physical site. Even if you're completely virtualized in the cloud, you're going to have remote workers, COVID style, and that's your sites. That's where your people live. So a lot of the previous standards that were written by the MPA were very much about moving DVD replication or master tapes around. So a lot of that stuff gets invalidated, but it's just about how you maintain this mapping. Anyway, I've taken up a lot of time.
Yeah, as I say, I've got whole loads of racks of standards, so this could be expanded out well beyond. So, for example, site security could be expanded out to include all the UK government and US government stuff. Obviously, you've got NIST CSF, NIST 800, NIST SDLD new framework, and you've got obviously the ISOs. You've got
and that's the beauty of it, right? Like what you want is to put this in the graph format so that the effort is almost just for one set of mappings, and then you get the others for free, right? Yeah. And that's the beauty. The beauty that we need some kind of common language and some common, sort of mappings between the different. So then you can navigate, and it all comes down to the idea that once you do a practice, so I go down to the practitioner, right? I want to make sure that when somebody does X, or when we have to make the business case to do Y, we can connect that to X standards. We can connect that to the say, hey, you do this because our customers are asking for this, or you do this because we have a duty to protect data here, or one of our mandates is Y. And I think what you're hitting on, Tony, is that the beauty of this is that we can expand once we get it right to other parts of the business and other risk frameworks and other models that have nothing to do native with security, but fundamentally they affect security, right? And the stuff that we do in security and technology affects those.
And I think what you're able to do is expose some of the bias in some of the mappings. Because what I did is I had a whole bunch of mappings that were going from these custom control set that people have spent way too long trying to write, and they all mapped out to these standards. So I just reversed it, flipped it around, and said, well, let's map down the other way. And you couldn't traverse the graph both ways. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm hoping with some help from Dennis is we can then expose some of the partisan adherence to a particular framework and how that stuff we can work out where those hotspots are and resolve it. And then you should be able to cross compare, because all of them originate from the same basic principles at a higher level. And I think what's important for me is to try and get this across as a business discussion, so people can get engaged with security at the CEO level, as well as it being the CISO and the SEC team.
For sure. I mean, I've found that before when I've been doing, I was doing some security reviews for AWS and Salesforce against government requirements for cloud. And I found that, for example, with AWS, I had to use about 4 or 5 different certification reports and standards and stuff to cover off all the government stuff, because not all the different standards included all the areas that the government requirements did.
Not quite aligned. Yeah.
So apart from me, Tony, and Ben, anybody else has a comment on this topic?
No, I was just going to say, but it kind of goes back to the comment I made the other day about traceability. And actually, in terms of assurance, that's really important to be able to traverse the graphs both ways. I think is a real benefit. It sounds amazing.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's definitely a topic for the summit. So going back to the cloud, what other areas you think that we should cover from a cloud security point of view? What are the challenges you have?
Common threat models. Yeah.
Oh yeah, threat models. Absolutely. Cloud-based threat models.
Or at least threat models for common cloud, situations such as, GitHub, etc.
Yeah.
I think I would be interested in is how other people cover like these multi-cloud environments with socks like Datadog or Elastic, like how other people use those and to pull all the logs and monitoring into one piece of
robotic.
Slow down.
Yeah.
Petra, you
try switching off the video because
you'll be interesting just to see how other people do it. Just because I think that
I agree.
Petra.
Again?
Petra, I think you need to switch up the video.
And off other videos as well.
Have you heard me what I said?
No.
Not really. Sorry. Repeat
Sounded good. Sounded good though.
Okay, switch off video.
The last, last
you
thing
hear
I heard
now?
was, how do people use these
Are
tools
you hearing now?
for metrics? Yeah, we can hear much better now.
It's gone.
I guess just whilst we're waiting, something I just, Ben, your point on governance resonates massively with me. I find that a lot of the issues that we focus a lot of time on there, the underlying issues are rooted in bad governance, and having a conversation around good governance and good management as two distinct things for cloud could be quite useful. I haven't shaped in my head what that could look like in practice, but as a topic, I think that could resonate quite well for the kind of the management audience.
Right.
So to Petra's point, I edit David's point, but to Petra's point, I think, shall we talk about site reliability engineering and how does it relate to security? Because those are the people who use all these tools.
So we have a really cool, SRE team, and yeah, because they fundamentally are the ones that will enforce a lot of these things. So
yeah, I think it would be interesting to see how other people use, because Datadog, for example, has also a security option to use where you can pull all the logs and monitoring from AWS or Azure, and you can pull it all into one place and get alerts and alarms if any of them get triggered. So I think it would be interesting just to see if what platforms other people use to do that, to kind of connect all these cloud environments into where you can monitor it all in one place.
How to consolidate.
So that's actually multi-cloud monitoring patterns, right?
Yeah.
Or security monitoring, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not just security monitoring, it's using monitoring for security as well, because these tools are already there and being used, but how can we utilize them instead of putting on more and more security tools in?
Well, I look at it. I think the security tools we should be using the leverage. So we should be leveraging the DevOps tools, right? We should be leveraging the operational tools, right? Yeah. The idea that security has its own set of SOC and visualization that doesn't get used, or it doesn't use the things from the other teams, is just insane.
Exactly.
So how can everybody here? So everybody here must have access to some of the players. So what can we call a session that will allow, almost like a show and tell, right? Because that's what we really want, right? We want a show and tell of how are you monitoring your clouds in a way that they have anonymized the data so they can show it, right? So should we actually call that session show and tell? Or can you come up with a better name for it?
Show and tell cloud monitoring?
Yeah.
And common tooling.
How I do it.
How I do it. Ooh.
Not me personally, but just call the session how I do it.
I think it sets a clear expectation. I don't think anyone's going to be confused walking into that.
No, I like that, because look, remember that the other thing that we're figuring out on the whole, theme of mapping and understanding the new world is we need to come up with formulas that work, right? In this distributed way. So talking about, for example, a pattern is something that will work because we can agree that the pattern is either good or bad. And when we talk about actually show and tell is actually probably a really good idea, because a session where you have 5 or 7 people showing for 5 minutes how they do it on a particular topic, that's kind of Petra what you're asking for, right?
Yeah, exactly. I just want to see how other people do it, how other people do the monitoring, and how do they pull it all together if they have multi-cloud environments. So yeah, definitely that's what I was going at.
Yeah, and then maybe what we can do is the model can be 10 minutes, 5-minute presentation, 5 minutes questions, right?
Yeah, that sounds great.
It can be bigger than that. We can start with that, and then we can really pull in some SREs as well, so we can exchange ideas, exchange views, and maybe we will come up with a better solution.
Yeah, but that model, sorry, go on.
yeah, like a sort of round table almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the model of somebody coming in, let's say, we now have moved to Datadog to a lot of our monitoring, and the SRE team seems to be loving it, right? And what I've seen is pretty spectacular. So it'd be really good to, for them to spend, 5 minutes and saying, look, this is how we do it. And then, and then we can ask questions about it, right? Patrick can show how they're doing security monitoring, how they're consuming the data. And then, for some of the guys in Capital One, I know done some spectacular stuff. Some, the guys at, Just Eat and Skyscanner, right? And even get other teams, even get people from AWS to show, and the Google Cloud and the GCP, and, they should be showing the best of and how it works, right?
Yeah.
Cool. I like that. How I do it. And then, have a little timer, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Cool. So I got multi-cloud security patterns, multi-cloud governance as codes, some cloud thread models, and then how I do it sessions, right?
Traceability, are we putting that on the show and tell? No.
What do you mean traceability?
Traceability of the controls and how we actually do it and implement them and testing it.
I think that comes in governance and compliance as code, right?
Cool.
Oh. What other topics do you guys think we should cover?
Something controversial.
Go ahead.
And anti-cloud.
Going back on-prem.
Well, so here's an interesting pattern, right? So one of the models that we're pursuing, right, internally, is that we building our product we're also building our products in Kubernetes native way. So the logic is that we will basically have 2 modes of operation. So we can run the product in raw Kubernetes without using any of the cloud's offerings. We'll then be able to, depending on what cloud you're in, leverage some of the cloud's capabilities. Which also means that we are also natively on-prem. And I have to say, I think as a model, it really appeals to me. Like I wish every product we buy gave me that flexibility.
Hybrid.
Yeah. What do you guys think of that model?
It's interesting. I bet it's a model that's rarely considered. So I'm sure a lot of people would be interested.
And it's quite interesting because what you find, it's also a great way to tackle technical debt head on, because you find that the reason you can't do it is because there's all this glued up stuff, right? There's all these little corner cases. And it's quite interesting because now, because of the email platform is such a high resilient stuff, we now get tripped because Azure decides to, in the middle of the night, do some stuff, right? And then AWS does other things, right? It's like, then you think, whoa, you guys should tell us about this, right? But it's almost like you need to start to have resilience against the cloud providers, right? If your job is to deliver an email, if your job is to deliver a transformation, if your job is to do X, you need to start to, also be abstracted, outside the cloud. So it's kind of this world where we'll use the cloud at maximum speed where it makes sense and almost in good times. But if things go wrong, you almost need a native, more, maybe more expensive, but less maybe efficient, but actually a lot more resilient workflow that gives you at least the assurance that what you want to do is always working. So yeah, we can have a queue over there that, scales spectacularly and delivers stuff, in sub-second or milliseconds. But actually, if that thing starts to barf, I prefer to have a queue that actually takes 5 seconds, but actually works. You know what I mean? So I think those patterns will be really good, right? And actually, somebody mentioned chaos engineering, right? So we should actually, because we actually had Miles, the guy from chaos engineering, he came to the summit the year before. And I think maybe now we're a bit more mature to actually do a couple of sessions on chaos engineering. Because this is what it is, right?
Actually, what's the name?
Miles something. In fact, my team started to do something which is really cool. They call it Failure Friday. Actually, Petra, you should run with it. Actually, you should go and present on it. Get those guys, or Thomas, you should go and nudge those guys to present, right? Because it's really cool, right? They now crashing things on purpose on Friday. It's called Failure Friday.
We've done Failure Fridays where, like,
oh yeah, there you are.
we cause a failure and it just doesn't break. Like, that's sort of Failure Fridays we have now.
But that's what we want,
Do you
right?
plan the failures though? Or does somebody just go, and I'm going to turn this on?
That is really cool. I'd love to hear a topic on that personally. I mean, obviously we all know the shift towards resilience, particularly for the more regulated industries, and I think that'd be absolutely awesome.
Certainly, lessons learned on implementing it and running it.
Yeah.
Look, and here you go.
War stories.
Look, how I do it, cloud resilience, right? There you go.
Yeah.
I love it when a concept can just be applied. Look, cloud resilience. So there you go, same model, right? 5 minutes on a case study of how you do X, and then 5 minutes of questions, right?
Do you think there's any merit in something on migration? Because I guess we're all still seeing loads of issues with organizations trying to migrate to the cloud completely in the wrong ways.
Yeah.
Lifting and shifting rather than really considering the benefits they want.
Well, yeah, well, I think, that's probably another how I do it topic, right? Cloud migration, right?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Because you're right. I think the reality is there's a lot of people, and I have to say, what is interesting about, for example, the platform that, I inherited, it's actually a really great microservices architecture. But it was a typical example that you take a team that was building something on-prem, that builds something on the cloud, that almost now uses the cloud really well, but still has the same, some ways, problems that you had on-prem, right? Because it's still highly coupled. You still have to deploy a lot of stuff, right? And then when you go into the serverless, you realize that you can do that in a so much more efficient way. But I think it's that migration, if you do the migration without fully understanding what's on the other side, obviously you're not going to leverage even the thinking of that world, right?
Yeah, totally. You take 2,000 servers and spin up 2,000 VMs. Like it's nonsense.
But on the other hand, for example, Photobox had a spectacular success story where they had these, these legacy Perl apps that they couldn't really, change a lot, but they worked really well. They were super solid. But it was typical hardware based, right? So the problem with Photobox is you don't get peaks. You get lots of peaks, and each one is bigger than the other, right? But they only last like 2 hours or 2 days, or when everybody makes their photo albums. And what they've done was they virtualize it. So basically run it off EC2. They build a router in front of it, and then they were running literally hundreds, not thousands, at peak of those containers, right? And literally each one was clocked to not handle more than 80 sessions in parallel. But if you can spin up, thousands of containers in parallel in Kubernetes, you stop caring, right? And the cost was minimal, right? Compared to what it costs to have hardware able to survive that thing for peaks that only come a couple of times a year, right? So it was a great example of actually shifting. Actually the other one they did really well was image rendering the image, the photos that you send into the final PDF. That used to be a massive bandwidth hog into the factories. And once we did that on the cloud, it was quite spectacular, because then you only send the final PDF down instead of actually sending all the images in very high definition to do that, on the factory, right? So that's a good example of shifting basically a certain level of processes into a cloud environment, right?
Yes, great example.
We are running over, so we should wrap up. We're going to have another session on this next Friday, not tomorrow, but the next Friday, 22nd. So any final comments, questions from anyone? We will be on Slack. We can always continue the discussions on Slack. You don't have to wait for the session. And if you don't have Slack, just you can find the links all on the Hey Summit site, and at the bottom you can see all the social media sites as well.
Actually, just one more little thing to talk about. We kind of now are running with the idea of doing training sessions for the 2 weeks before the summit. And one of the things we exactly just talking with one of the guys who created this really great DevSecOps tool. So he's going to make this available for all the kind of summit attendees for free. And the logic would be to run sessions before the summit because it's a great learning tool for DevSecOps. So if you know of other tools or other training sessions that we can do in those 2 weeks before, the logic is that we want to make sure that the attendees is as well prepared as possible for the summit. But it's also a great way to even learn collaboratively some of the tools. So the logic is that you have, for example, a Juice Shop session where a number of people, a number of attendees are trying to use Juice Shop, and the key developers of Juice Shop are also there, or a DevSecOps tool, or other training tools, or OAS tools, or even commercial tools. As long as they're freely available to the attendees, that would be quite a cool model. So let us know if you have other ideas of training sessions that we can run on those 2 weeks before the summit. Cool.
That'd be cool.
And on that note, see you tomorrow, or if not, next week.
Cool. See you.
Goodbye all.
See you
Take care.
tomorrow.
Cheers. See ya.
Bye.